I'll call this meeting to order, the regularly scheduled meeting of the Transportation Public Works Committee, this day, July 30th, 2019. I'm Councilmember Reich, I chair the committee, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Council members Palmisano, Bender, and Fletcher. We are a quorum, and we'll proceed with today's agenda. Today's agenda has 14 items, has a discussion item and a public hearing. The remainder are on consent. I'll go through those items, and any committee member can pull them for further deliberation if they wish. Item 2 is the 28th Avenue South Bridge Replacement Project, a request for variance from MnDOT, State Aid rules. Item 3 is the agreement with the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization for the 8th Street South Reconstruction Project. Item 4 is the 33rd Street East, 35th Street East, Hiawatha to Minnehaha Avenue Street Reconstruction and Resurfacing Project. It's a construction services agreement. Item 5 is the University of Minnesota Protected Bikeway Project, an appropriation increase, the amounts listed. Item 6 is the engineering services agreement with Black & Veatch for the Fridley Softening Plant Lime Slaker Replacement and Storage Upgrade Project. Item 7 is a contract amendment with Black & Veatch for the design and construction and engineering services for tunneled water main under the Mississippi River. Item 8 is a contract amendment with Kimley Horn and Associates for the Hennepin Avenue Street Reconstruction Project. Item 9 is a memorandum of understanding with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency regarding investigations and other operations in city-managed public right-of-way. Item 10 is the West Broadway Improvement Special Service District 2020 proposed services and service charges, and setting that public hearing for September 17th. Item 11 is the Special Service Districts, the 428A districts, and their proposed services for this year, the charges, and setting that public hearing also for September 17th. Item 12 is the Downtown Business Improvement Special Service Districts 2020 proposed service charges, and setting that public hearing also for September 17th. And the final consent item is the bid for the 10th Avenue Southeast River Bridge Rehabilitation Project. Does committee members wish to pull any item? Seeing none, I'll move all items for approval as submitted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Dissenting nay. Those items carry, and then we can now go to item 1, our first public hearing. Good morning, Director Hutchinson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We have one public hearing today regarding the sidewalk repair and construction assessments. Information will be presented by Mike Kennedy, the Director of Transportation Maintenance and Repair.
Chair, members of the committee, again, I'm Mike Kennedy. I'm the Director of our Transportation Maintenance and Repair Division in Public Works. Public Works completed its annual inspection and repair of public sidewalks in 2018. Property owners had the option of contracting for the repairs themselves or allowing the city to complete the work and be billed or assessed for that work. For those choosing the latter, this action is to proceed with the process for collecting those assessments. In 2018, we had 1,543 properties that had work done on their sidewalks. All property owners receive a bill for the completed work. If the property owner did not pay the bill, the cost of the work will be listed on the assessment roll and assessed to the property taxes as a special assessment on their 2020 taxes. If the property owner chooses to contest the cost of the work, they had the opportunity to appeal at administrative hearing in front of our administrative hearing officer. That occurred on June 18th, and we had 7 people submit appeals, but none of them actually appeared. If the property owner is satisfied with the determination of the administrative hearing officer, no further action is necessary. If the property owner chooses to contest the administrative hearing officer's determination, they may elect to appeal at the public hearing at this committee today. If they are not satisfied with the decision of the committee, they may then appeal to district court. A list of properties and the charges to be assessed is attached with this report. The amount to be assessed as special assessment principal is the cost of the work plus the sidewalk overhead charge. The sidewalk overhead charge is 10% of the cost of the work with a cap of $50. The total principal amount and proposed assessments on the list of properties to be assessed, less prepayments received and adjustments by the administrative hearing officer, is $503,089.19. So today, our recommendation is passage of a resolution adopting and levying the assessments and adopting the assessment roll in the amount stated earlier for the sidewalk repair and construction for the 2018 construction season on the list of property owners, properties dated July 1st, 2019. So that's my presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take those, and we have staff here if there are other questions. We are not aware that anybody, we were not notified that anybody was going to appear today.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the staff per the presentation? Seeing none, I will then open the public hearing. Anyone signed in? Anyone wish to come forward? Anyone wish to come forward? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And if there's no further discussion, move the item as submitted and described by staff. All in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting name. That carries. And we can now go to the discussion item. Director Hutchinson.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm pleased to introduce this next discussion item. It's receiving and filing of the Your City, Your Streets 2018 Progress Report. In past years, we've presented to you our accomplishments with the funds that have been granted for our work on streets as part of the 20-year streets funding plan. This year, we have chosen to provide additional information in order to take a bit of a pause, work collaboratively with the finance department, and do some backcasting as well as forecasting on our programming of the funds. So today we have a two-part presentation, one that explains our programming and the second part that explains our accomplishments. I'm going to introduce Jenny Hager, the Director of Transportation Planning, to begin the presentation. Others from Transportation Planning are also here to assist.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you this morning. My name is Jennifer Hager. I'm the Director of Transportation Planning and Programming. Today we have our annual report back to you on the 20-year streets funding plan work, which we call the Your City, Your Streets Progress Report. I will begin today's presentation with a brief recap of the ordinance and discuss our efforts to meet the programming targets stipulated in the ordinance. And then I will turn the presentation over to Nathan Koster, also of Transportation Planning and Programming, to review our accomplishments from 2018. As you all know, the 20-year Parks and Streets Funding Ordinance was signed on April 29th of 2016. And beginning in 2017, it provided an annual guaranteed minimum amount of funding for street capital projects. And it also requires us to report back annually on our work. Once the ordinance was passed, Public Works worked quickly to develop the 20-year streets funding plan, which defines the criteria-based system by which projects would be selected for inclusion in the capital improvement program, and included a focus on racial and economic equity. The criteria is shown here for you. Again, we have asset condition and we have equity shown, including community demographics and uses and mode. We began using this criteria with the amended 2017 to 2021 CIP, and we've been using it ever since. We've also been providing for you annual reports by reviewing our accomplishments each year. We will do that today, but we also wanted to take a deeper dive into our programming targets. So we are about 3 years into our work on this ordinance, and this is a good time for a more thorough review and analysis. Our programming targets are set annually through a simple formula of A plus B. This is stipulated in the ordinance. The ordinance calls out, this consists of historical net debt bond funding levels, we'll call this A, plus the increased funding provided by the streets funding plan, we'll call this B. B is a known number described in the ordinance. It's $21.2 million plus inflation over the course of the ordinance. However, A is a number that was not clearly defined in the ordinance, and therefore there are different opinions and interpretations for what A was intended to be. So Public Works is working collaboratively with the Finance Department to clarify what the original intent for what A was meant to be. So what is A? A is a historical average of net debt bond allocations to street paving. So now I want to show you a series of graphs that show A, that show B, and that show A plus B, which is our programming target, with our annual programming since the ordinance took effect in 2017. This first chart shows backwards starting in 2017. A is shown as the black line. That's the historical net debt bond funding for street paving. B is shown as the red dashed line. That's the 21.2 million, and it goes up because it's being inflated over time. And A plus B, which is our funding target, is the green dashed line. The blue bars represent our programming each year for street paving projects. You can see some years are high, some years are low, but we make up for the low years with the high years, and on average, we exceed our programming target. I'll just pause to see if there's any questions on that.
Any questions? See none, you proceed.
Okay. We also wanted to show you how we are leveraging our local investments to bring in federal grants strictly for paving projects. So the lighter blue on top of the dark blue bars represent where we have brought in federal funding for only paving projects in each year. And the last two charts I have for you show you the proposed CIP, which is under review by CLIC and which will be part of what is in the proposed budget before the mayor and the council right now. Just for your information, just to bring the chart in closer to a 5-year look. Same information, A, black bar, B, red dashed line, funding target is the green dashed line, and then putting the federal funding on top of that. That concludes my information for today, and I'll just pause to see if there are any questions before I bring Nathan up to go through the 2018 accomplishments for you.
Any questions? Councilmember Palmisano.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Hager, I want to thank you for putting this in such a clear way. I had an opportunity to preview this with you yesterday, and I think it's really important for the public to be able to see how we're making good on these past promises and ordinance, and also to see the thoughtful work going into the planning of these projects, which take multiple years, which are planned multiple years out. A question that I had for you yesterday that I wanted to ask you today is about, it was called the Parks and Roads Ordinance, or NPP 20. What isn't considered in this, and something particularly important to areas around the Grand Rounds area, are park roads. So we did parks and roads, but not park roads. And I understand that in the past few years, there has been a new and improved agreement with how we manage those park roads in collaboration with the park board. And I was wondering if you could just help to highlight that also and touch on that, because I know you were able to in private.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Palmisano. Yes, thank you for the question. Parkways do serve a role in our overall transportation network, and the city has a longstanding commitment to contribute to the maintenance of the parkways, and that includes milling and overlaying of them through our parkway paving program. Subsequent to the streets funding ordinance, and at the request of the park board, Public Works did complete an analysis of our parkways similar to what we completed of our city street network. And we found, leading up to the streets funding ordinance, and we found that while the current average condition of the parkways was good, maintaining the current funding levels for the parkways would result in a projected decrease in the average parkway condition over time. And so parkway paving is reflected on the charts that you're seeing here today. One, because it historically has been part of our base paving program, and two, because the analysis supported the need for budget flexibility and additional investments into the parkway system in accordance with our criteria-based process for our city street network to ensure a consistent overall citywide average condition for our network. So you are seeing parkway paving in these charts here today.
Any other questions for the presentation? Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a very reasonable approach. And of course, we can always increase funding if there are additional needs or problems identified. I wanted to ask, before you go into all of these results related to bicycle and pedestrian safety that we're about to see, could you talk about, or the director, whomever from the department, about how bicycle and pedestrian funding fits into this? Because we know that a lot of those projects are integrated into existing capital projects. We know some are standalone, as we've invested in our protected bikeway and standalone pedestrian safety improvements, and that may evolve in future budgets as well as we look at the transportation action plan. So I guess I just said a lot, but I wanted to see if you could comment on how we're funding bicycle and pedestrian safety and how that shows up in this budget as presented this way.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Council President Bender. The numbers that you see on here are for street paving, and there's additional net debt bonds and other funding sources in our capital program that go towards other asset needs and infrastructure needs and programs. And so these numbers do not show the funding that's going to bridges, traffic programs, non-motorized programs and projects, and so on and so forth. So for non-motorized projects and initiatives that are being completed with street paving projects, they're included in these numbers, but for the standalone projects and programs that are funded separately, they're not reflected on these charts. They're in the capital program reflected separately.
Mr. Chair and Council President Bender, I'll add just a few things to that. First of all, just a reminder that this is the capital program as it's been proposed to CLIC. So there may be changes that you will see as the mayor completes his work to propose the budget. Just a side note on that. I also just want to reflect the work of the Complete Streets policy and ordinance, which really guides how every street is rebuilt and repaved, and we take the opportunity to add pedestrian and bicycle and transit improvements every time we repave a street. So along with the standalone programs, we're also using the opportunity of our paving work to increase mobility for people who are walking and biking.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll proceed with the next.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Nathan Coster, Supervisor Transportation Planner in the Transportation Planning and Programming Division of Public Works. Today, my part of the presentation will focus on the progress report and accomplishments, which will include summary of individual projects and some of the mileage and projects goals that were accomplished throughout 2018. Before I start, I do want to acknowledge that although I'm here to talk about a lot of the accomplishments, a lot of people in Public Works are involved in these projects, whether it's the planning, design, operation, whether it's the traffic or utilities under the street, as well as the construction and maintenance. And it takes a lot of people to make these projects a reality. So although I'm here presenting, I just want to indicate that there's a lot of people that go into making these projects that the residents and workers of Minneapolis do see. In addition, there's a lot of people, a couple people in transportation planning I do want to acknowledge for assisting with the presentation, as well as this capital improvement program. That would be Liz Heyman, Abdullahi Abdullah, Trey Joyner, and Anna Holtman helped with the graphics. So there's a lot of people who went into helping with this presentation today. A couple other things before we start is you'll hear a couple themes throughout these projects and accomplishments, and that is being data-driven, looking at both the condition of our streets as well as the crashes or other analytics and statistics that help us go into picking and selecting projects. Second is partnerships. We're working really closely with MnDOT and Hennepin County to work on some of our most challenging streets and make those priorities. As well as Metro Transit, there's a number of transit projects coming up that we are working to coordinate early and often. Seizing opportunities. There's a number of these projects without working with those partnerships that couldn't be a reality, and making sure we get in early and we minimize disruptions. Fourth one is innovation. You'll see a lot of projects that I'm highlighting today where we're trying new things and seeing how they work in our street right away. And then lastly, it would be equity. And it's not less, it's very forward in our thinking of both our programming and funding of projects, but also how we're looking at the location and how we're delivering projects throughout our entire city. So the first area I want to focus on is the pedestrian area, and you'll see slightly different statistics and accomplishments than last year. We want to make sure we're accurately reflecting the type of projects that we're doing and how we're summarizing them. First, I'll start with curb extensions or bump outs. There was 132 bump outs installed in 2018. Most of these are through reconstruction projects, as we have a chance to really re-look at what the right-of-way is, so we're gaining a lot of opportunities to add those bump outs. But I would like to call it that a number of bump outs are also being added with our traffic projects now as we're rebuilding our signals. The second one is 3 miles of sidewalk gaps. 2018 was a really big year for adding to our sidewalk network. 3 miles of gaps, particularly in areas that have concentrations of employment that are allowing people to have access to jobs throughout the city. We added 3 street lighting corridors. These were along Emerson Avenue North, Fremont Avenue North, and 33rd Avenue North. The other one is now we're tracking our ability to do safety conversions throughout the city, and these can be accomplished through many ways, whether it's through restriping, narrowing of lanes, narrowing the curb-to-curb width. But this really highlights the amount of mileage that we're accomplishing throughout the city with safety improvements. And then the last one is the ADA ramps installed. This past year, we installed 479 ADA ramps. Most of these were achieved with our paving programs, but these also include ramps accomplished by our ADA ramp retrofit program that I'll be highlighting later, as well as projects with traffic, our utilities, as well as partner agencies such as Hennepin County, MnDOT, and our private utilities. So this is up by about 100 ramps as compared to last year. So 479 this past year. Now I'll be highlighting a number of individual projects. This one is in the pedestrian safety program. This is on 6th Street South in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood. We built 2 mid-block pedestrian bump outs. This is an area closer to the Blue Line LRT station as well as the Hiawatha Trail. This provides better sight lines in an area where there's a lot of demand for both people walking, access to transit, while also a lot of parking. Really helps increase the visibility of people crossing the street. Second project was 5th Street Northeast. This is near school and along a bike route. It was a very skewed intersection, so this provided a better way to reorganize the space, both for people walking, but also for people driving, to provide more predictable movements adjacent to a school. The next project I'd like to highlight is our sidewalk gap project on Chicago Ave. This was our first year doing the sidewalk gap program, and the project that was selected was Chicago Ave. This is between the blocks of 44th and 46th. This is along an existing high-frequency transit route, but along a route that's planned for the D line adjacent to a station. So providing connectivity to existing high-frequency transit as well as collaborating in advance with Metro Transit on filling a sidewalk gap near a future D line station. The next photo is an example of our ADA ramp replacement program. This is at 44th and Upton Avenue North near Loring Elementary School. And then I'll be highlighting a series of Safe Routes projects that were accomplished in 2018. This one happens to be near Southwest High School at the intersection of Xerxes Ave South and 47th Street West. Another project that we were able to accomplish or finish up last year was with our Anderson Safe Routes to School project. This implemented a 2-way off-street trail on 28th Street East that allows students then to have access to the school from the nearby Midtown Greenway, along with connections to our adjacent north-south bike boulevards. This one is our 29th Ave South median diverter at the Midtown Greenway. This helps clarify the crossing movements at the Midtown Greenway along a very popular route to the Seward Montessori School and the Seward neighborhood. The next area I want to highlight is our bicycle accomplishments. And what I really want to highlight before I really jump into this is while it's focusing on some of our improvements or expansions or upgrades of the bicycle network, A lot of these projects were about overall safety and reorganizing the space, not just for bicycle accommodations, but making the streets safer for all users. And that is very front and center in a lot of our bike projects. And I'd just like to call out that there was a recent study published by University of Colorado at Denver in June of 2019, and it had looked at 13 cities across the country at historical data. It just so happened that Minneapolis was one of them. And it focused on why cities with bike infrastructure are they getting safer. And what I thought was a really interesting statistic is in the study, Minneapolis specific, it said there was a 205% mode share increase in bicycling. But overall, for all fatal crashes throughout the city, they saw a reduction in 35%. And what they were able to tie back with this study is that it's not just about strength in numbers for bicycles and bicycle infrastructure, but it's the type of infrastructure you're building, specifically protected bikeways and trails. And it's making the street safer for all users. So I thought that'd be really helpful in framing some of our bicycle projects, because although it calls out one mode, we are really making our street safer for all users. And that's even for people driving their vehicles as well. So with that being said, I do want to call out some of the statistics and our accomplishments. Is this past year we had 7.4 miles of new protected bikeways. We had 5.2 miles of either upgraded or new bicycle facilities. And of that, about 20%, so about 2.6 miles, was in areas of our ACP 50 areas throughout the city. So this slide just highlights a geographic distribution of some of our bicycle cities, our bicycle facilities that were accomplished in 2018. It was a pretty big year, especially for our protected bikeways. And overall, within a snapshot of how we're doing as a city, we're at about 250 miles. And as it relates to our protected bikeways, at the end of 2018, we have 25 miles of protected bikeways. And as some of you may recall from our climate action plan, our goal was to meet or exceed 30 miles of protected bikeways by 2020. And I know I'm focusing on 2018, but we're in the midst of 2019 in our construction. And at the end of 2019, we will have 32.2 miles of protected bikeways. So not only have we met that, but we have exceeded it and a year earlier. So some of the projects I want to highlight is, I want to start with some opportunistic improvements that we have on certain corridors. And this one is 24th Street West, and another example of how when we're looking at some of our street paving improvements, we're also able to coordinate other safety improvements with projects. And this one was able to implement the bike lanes from Hennepin through roughly 3rd Ave. Something a little bit newer that we've been collaborating with our traffic staff on is what we're calling opportunity safety projects. And in certain cases, these are more restriping and doing short gap improvements in bike projects throughout the city. We did about 3 or 4 of these last year. This is an example in the Dinkytown area, 14th Ave Southeast, where we had very wide travel lanes, but it was a known connection between very popular routes. So we were able to implement bike lanes for a short stretch, connecting to other popular routes, while also having the side benefits of having safety improvements along a very high usage walking route throughout in the campus area. This one is an example of how not only are we implementing our protected bikeways, but we're also looking to upgrade those and go back to those. This is an example of 3rd Ave South near the Convention Center. We're able to implement planters. On the theme of innovation, this is also a stretch of bikeway that had previously been a 4-lane undivided street. Then it got converted to a 3-lane with bike lanes. And then during the resurfacing project, we were able to continue, evaluate, and look at what bikeway improvements could be implemented. And this extends the protected bikeway that had initially been over the river. Now it's connecting from Lyndale all the way to Penn. And we did new treatment that was a raised concrete median buffer that provides physical vertical separation for people biking along the street. This next project is along Emerson and Fremont Ave North. The city received a grant, a federal grant for this project. And I'd just like to highlight that although this has been identified as a protected bikeway project, these corridors in North Minneapolis had some of the highest rate of pedestrian crashes in the entire city, and they were very difficult crossings for people walking. There were a number of schools and parks in the neighborhood, and you had 2-lane one-way streets where residents had communicated that there was a lot of challenges crossing these barriers. So not only were we able to implement protected bikeways, but we were able to integrate pedestrian crossing improvements in advance of the D-line work that we're working with Metro Transit. So reorganizing the space for future high-frequency transit while making it easier to cross the street for people walking and implementing protected bikeways. The next one is Industrial Boulevard. This is a protected bikeway trail facility. We were approached by MnDOT, who had some maintenance work along the freeway and some of the ADA ramp upgrades. And in looking at their plans, as well as the vision with the park board, we were able to coordinate across multiple agencies to start filling the gap of the grand rounds in Northeast Minneapolis. Without this collaboration and foresight from many people, this could have been a missed opportunity, but it turned out to be the stepping stone for a couple projects in filling the grand rounds missing link. Next project I think a lot of people are familiar with, but the Samotar Crossing project was completed and had its groundbreaking this past year, repurposing a old freeway off-ramp into a multi-purpose trail connecting a major barrier between the Cedar Riverside neighborhood and downtown Minneapolis. Next project, Protected Bikeways Program. This is 12th Street East. This is filling an off-street trail gap as a part of a longer-term vision between connecting residents to neighborhoods near and close to downtown, south of downtown, into the downtown area. So this is more of a first phase in getting that started, and we were able to work early so we could be collaborating with a much larger project on 35W, so construction activities were staged appropriately. This next project, 11th Ave South, this was looking at an upgrade of an existing facility. This had been one of our first protected bikeways, and it had implemented some parking protected. But in addition to looking at an upgrade, through the engagement process, we heard a lot from the residents. It was more about reorganizing the street and making it safer for a lot of the increased density and residents in the area. So by working closely with the ward office and the neighborhoods, we're able to integrate a lot of elements of pedestrian safety into this protected bikeway upgrade project. And I would like to call out that in addition to upgrading the facility, we're also looking at pilot treatments of a protected intersection at 11th Ave South and 2nd, as well as some new innovative parking protected treatments near Gold Medal Park, where we're looking at access and accessibility for ADA compliancy near the park. And then I believe the last trail project I want to highlight is, although a very short stretch, this one did require an easement and some right-of-way acquisition to continue to fill the east-west trail, referred to by some as the Great Northern Greenway in Northeast Minneapolis. And although a one-block segment, it was a very important one-block gap in this project. So the next area I want to focus on is streets, and the first slide will kind of have a little bit of streets infrastructure as well as streets paving. And I did want to highlight some of the work that's being done by our traffic division, and this includes a number of our signal projects. So this past year they had 27 signal upgrades, and this includes ADA ramps as well as APS signals. And as I said, a lot of our traffic signal projects are including bump outs as standard treatments as a part of their projects now. Similarly, we had 31 intersections at signals that were upgraded for TSP. TSP is Transit Signal Priority. This is another example of working closely with Metro Transit on upcoming and planned BRT routes. We're able to work with them on the Penn Ave corridor for the C line to upgrade those signals for TSP, as well as looking into the future with the D line, upgrading signals along Emerson, Fremont Ave North, as well as Chicago Ave South, so that the signals are ready for TSP, both for existing high-frequency transit, but also looking forward to those BRT routes. So more specifically to paving, I want to call out 3 areas that we really focus on where most of our work occurs, and that's in street resurfacing. So That's more of the mill and overlay of the streets. Concrete rehab, a newer program in our second year, as well as our traditional street reconstruction. So all these numbers fall within our typical ranges that we see for these programs. Street resurfacing, we try to get about 25 to 30 miles a year. So last year was right within that range of 26.7. Of that, there's 18 miles in ACP 50 areas. Last year, as I said, was a continuation of concrete rehab. We were in year 2 of the Waite Park neighborhood in northeast Minneapolis. And then for street reconstruction, which I'll be highlighting those projects individually, but we had about 4.4 miles of street reconstruction, of which 1.6 miles were in ACP 50 areas. So the first project I was going to highlight with street reconstruction was 18th Ave Northeast. This was a multi-year project, which was, as I said, once again, highlighting the 18th Ave trail across the east-west trail across northeast Minneapolis. The second project is 61st Street West. This is an area that had a number of sidewalk gaps and was connecting Lyndale to Nicollet Ave South. The third project is a really good example of where we're able to leverage those federal funds. Broadway Street had been a 4-lane undivided. Now it's a 2-way with a center turn lane, addressing sidewalk gaps, as well as adding a trail to help with those multimodal connections linking into our plans for the Grand Round Missing Link, as well as other trails in Northeast. Next project is Hennepin Avenue South. This was from Lake to 36th. This was a street that had sidewalk back a curb, and this project was able to add boulevards, widen sidewalks in areas, and add a bike lane. Next project is 28th Ave South. So this is basically from Trunk Highway 62, the Crosstown Highway, down to roughly the airport access point on the very south end of Minneapolis. And the last project I want to highlight is Mid-City Industrial. This will be a multi-year phased project in the Mid-City Industrial neighborhood. Creative title name for the project. But this will be about a little over 2 miles of streets in an industrial area. And the one thing I'd highlight is a lot of these streets were built in an era when the sidewalks weren't constructed, so this project is going to add significantly the amount of sidewalks to increase access for people walking or taking transit to access these job centers. So this is a pretty important project in that area of Northeast. With that being said, that concludes my presentation, and I'll stand by for any questions.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for this presentation. This is such good work. And I'll just say, people love it. People love seeing these changes. I know how much work went into, for example, the intersection at 11th. And there is so much positive change happening, and it is creating a demand for more. It is creating a demand for people to look for even faster change and to recognize, hey, this happened in that neighborhood. I want to see it happen at this neighborhood. I can see where it would be helpful. So you're showing a successful proof of concept that's creating a lot of demand, and I'm often going to be the voice of that demand. So just like kind of be ready that we want a lot more of what you're doing. The other thing that I'll say is, and it kind of breaks my heart to point this out, but 11th Avenue, which is such a successful project in general, for lack of a little bit of signage and education to help people understand the change, even in the picture that you showed here of it, there's a car parked in the bike lane in the background getting across Washington, and it kills me because it happens every day, and it almost erases the value of the bike lane if there's cars in it, and we just need to explain to people better how this works because people constantly park in it. I live on that block, so I know, I see it every day, and I see that it's a coin toss every time I walk out of my apartment whether I'm going to see a car in the bike lane or not. I mean, it's really like 50-50. So I would encourage you, and this has been something we've talked about, and I want to keep talking about it, that signage and kind of user education, and when you're making these changes that change what the streets feel like and how they operate and how people are supposed to use them, we have to help drivers understand how they're supposed to use these streets as a part of the budget for these projects and as a part of the plan for these projects, or it really undermines their effectiveness. So I just want to make sure signage as a part of the plan for every single one of these that come out. I think we get a lot of feedback about it, and partially it's because people can see the potential of how good these streets are if they're used the way they're intended to be. And so I really just need your help in helping people understand how to use the new streets that you're designing for us.
Thank you. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also just wanted to voice my thanks and excitement about all of this progress and the excellent work the department is doing. We added a significant amount of funding with a new policy directive from the council at the same time, around the same time, and the department embraced it. And I know how hard staff has been working to get all these projects through, to plan them, to design them, to do community engagement, to build support, and also to adjust when we need to. So it's like seen and appreciated how much work you're doing above and beyond what you were doing a few years ago. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I also get a lot of complaints about cars parked in the bike lane, and I know you guys are looking at specific places where this is happening. In my ward, it's Hennepin Avenue between Lake and 31st Street. I too take it as a sign that the community is embracing bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and wants it to work really well. So I think as we continue to monitor these changes and make improvements, I think there'll be solutions coming forward. I also just wanted to highlight the importance of combining policy direction with budget investments. And this exciting news about our meeting and exceeding our goal on protected bikeways is in part because in my first year in office in 2014, thanks to the leadership of the chair and others, we were able to invest in standalone funding for protected bikeway program for the first time ever. And we had a little bit of money here and there in the past, but that clear direction, adopting a plan, adopting a policy to go, and then adopting the funding to go with it and implement it is how we were able to achieve that goal. And so as we look toward the Transportation Action Plan and the exciting vision I think it will show for our community, building on bicycle and pedestrian safety, looking at some of these high crash intersections, there are a lot in my ward, there are a lot in places where people rely on biking, walking, and transit, and our vision for transit going forward, just to always remember that funding piece is so critical. And I've been talking with the director and others about making sure that we're being proactive and planning for the budgets coming ahead so that we have the resources we need to make sure our streets are safe. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other comments per the presentation? Seeing none, I'll just close, and I think Council President Bender said thank you 17 times. I'll make it 18. Thanks ever so much. And both presentations were fantastic. I think kind of extending on Councilmember Fletcher's point, the demand and what we expect, I think, is now greatly expanded and increased. What would have been earlier in my career up here cutting edge is now becoming, under your implementation, the new normal, and it's pretty awesome to see that transformation. The department, always known to deliver, is now delivering numbers that just are spectacular, pretty incredible, and the results, of course, deeply appreciated by our constituency. It's just very wow. It's very incredible. As to the first presentation, I think Councilmember Palmisano said it best. Very well, very succinct, very well presented, very succinct. It takes a very complicated set of spreadsheets and boils it down into what we're actually asking vis-a-vis our policy directive. And I think that was accomplished rather well. Actually, I think we should put it on cable TV on a kind of a permanent PSA basis because it's just so succinct. Yeah, I could go on, but very incredible work, very well presented, and we're very grateful for it. So thank you. For that. And then with the formal action before us, I will move to receive and file the Your City, Your Streets 2018 Progress Report. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Dissenting nay. That carries, and we are adjourned.